Tilder! This is the YC Onion Hotdog Slider version 3.0. Costs nearly $400 for either the 31-inch or the 39-inch version. The headline feature is the fact that you can actually pair your Zhiyun or DJI gimbals for full motion-controlled shots. Does it work well? With my Zhiyun Weebill S, not so much. Supposedly DJI is better, but I have no way of testing this for sure. It's got a cool settings bar in the middle so that you can actually get panoramic shots or parallax shots without ever touching a fluid head. You can move between motor and manual slides in under a minute. The motor is a servo motor, so it is going to make sounds. But it is powerful enough to pull some weight upwards. Do I recommend it? If you are looking to get full motion control shots in your videos, no. It's best to get a dedicated setup. If you are a YouTuber or narrative filmmaker, it really depends on how you like to move your slider. I personally like to move everything manually, in which case I actually choose the Zeppon E800 over the Hotdog slider because it's got a better value for money and much easier to control. Done! Roll that intro! What's going on, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers come first, the reasons come last, but we're constantly and always still learning. So today we're going to be talking about the YC Onion Hotdog Slider version 3.0, and if it's going to be the right slider for you and your overall filmmaking kit. And I want to thank YC Onion for sending this out to me so I can provide you with my review today. Now again, they're not watching this video. They haven't told me to say anything specific, no money exchanged hands, yada, yada, yada. Everything you hear is my own opinion, as always on this channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at just shy of $400, the slider, you have two options. You have a 31-inch and a 39-inch, and there's literally only a $10 difference between the two. So you're gonna have to determine whether or not you want that extra 8 inches, because that's a significant amount. And because the slider is not one of the Edelkrone style or the Zeppon micro slider, where it can actually be almost half the size but still achieve the same amount of slide, you probably won't be able to do those dolly ins. So you're gonna have to figure out which version do you actually want. Now, the main selling feature of this entire system is the fact that if you have a DJI gimbal or a Zhiyun gimbal, you can actually pair it with the motor through the YC Onion app, and therefore actually control all of it into a motion control system. Now I'm going to touch on that in a little bit later in the video, because let's talk about the build quality real quick. In terms of the build quality, it's primarily made out of metal. The rails are actually carbon fiber, which is nice and keeps everything nice and lightweight. What I really love is that there's this little middle bar setting. Depending on how you set it, you can actually turn this slider to either do a parallax shot or a panoramic shot. This is really great for YouTubers that are constantly doing product B-rolls, and maybe that's all they're doing. They're just doing parallax shots. So having this thing basically set up already, and you basically just move the slider, or you can use the motor and you don't actually have to hand push anything. So this is definitely one of my favorite features of this slider. And last but not least, I really like that you can actually attach or detach the motor quite quickly. There's really only 2 screws that you have to screw the motor onto, then feed the belt where it needs to be and tighten it up, and you're good to go. It's a very easy way to go between motorized slides and manual slides, which is awesome depending on what you need on set. Now, there are some odd things about the design, and I'm probably going to go into a little bit of an OCD here, but if you look at the tripod mount where you're supposed to mount the whole thing, the screw hole is not in the center. You're going to have to choose one slightly off to the right or the left. Now, whether or not this is a major problem, probably isn't, but this is my OCD of I just wished it was right in the center. And the last thing is that the motor is actually a servo motor, which means you're basically going to hear it as it's moving. You hear it the loudest at 100%. So depending on what it is that you actually need for a slider to go back and forth, say for an interview, you're going to have to determine where's the sweet spot so that the person you're interviewing is not constantly hearing this whir, whir, whir sound, especially when it's ramping up, because then you're going to hear whir, and that's probably going to be very distracting. Now, because it is a servo motor, you are able to get these rising jib shots if you actually need it. Now, I don't really do a whole lot of these shots, and this is probably the worst situation I can put it in, with a gimbal holding the camera super far out and having the motor pull it up. And without further ado, let's dive into the main selling feature of actually using your gimbal with the motor. To pair the slider and the gimbal, simply go to the YC Onion app, click this little menu button up here, then choose your motor and your gimbal, then enter the interlink mode. From here, we need to set the initial waypoint for the slider motor. And this is all in real time, so you can see just how long this is actually going to take. After that, we're going to confirm that that is our first starting position, but we actually have to do one more thing, which is tell the gimbal where we want it to start as well. So we use those controls, and then we hit this plus button, in which case we set the first waypoint. Now to set the second position, we go up here and we click to the right, as you can see here, so we can start setting up point B. And same thing, we can use these controls to figure out where we want our gimbal to actually be pointing and press the plus sign. You can actually set more than one point. I think you can actually set up to 5 different points. So if you need that, you can. Next, we're going to hit the video shot over here and simply hit the first button, which is our first waypoint. And it's going to go ahead and make its way over. And then simply hit the other waypoint and it will continue. Now, if you were paying close attention, you probably noticed something was a little off, and you are correct. The gimbal seems to be moving at a different pace than the slider motor itself. So the movement is not really slow, and sometimes the gimbal will actually get to its final point before the slider does. And this definitely has some effect in terms of the overall smoothness of your shot, including the fact that the gimbal is actually quite high off, so we can basically take a look at what it looks like here. You'll notice that in the beginning, it's actually going to jitter the gimbal a little bit, and that's simply because the camera is set pretty high. And as we make our way through this parallax shot, you'll notice that the Sony camera is getting off center, and that's simply because the gimbal got to its point before the slider did. And as we make our way back to the beginning waypoint, again, you see that there's a little bit of jitter happening here. And that's, again, because the camera is set very, very high. So I would say it's probably better just to get a dedicated system. And that's probably going to give you a much smoother shot and more consistent than this pairing. The motor is pretty simple to operate. Basically, once you turn it on, you're going to be asked to set your A and B points. So simply do that by confirming with the knob up there. Confirm one more time until it goes to video mode, and that way it locks it in and you can go between your A and B points. Now, if you want to change the speed of everything, then simply rotate the dial here. Rotate it kind of slowly. Don't do it so fast because otherwise it kind of misses. But anyways, that's how you change the speed. If you want it to go between the A and B points automatically, simply hit the power button once and then hit one of the waypoints and it's going to automatically start moving back and forth. To stop this, basically just hit the pause button up top. And if you want to go back to resetting your A and B points, simply hold down the button, wait for it to go back to set A and B, and there you go. So what's the bottom line here? Is the YC Onion Hotdog slider version 3.0 something you should be thinking about for your overall filmmaking kit, and do I recommend it? Well, I'm actually going to form my opinions against the Zeppon slider, which is my current slider of choice, the 800 series without the motor, because when you incorporate the motor on the Zeppon, they're basically about the same price and more or less offer similar features. So we're going to kind of talk about that between these two sliders. Lastly, I'm also going to be talking a little bit more in terms of a narrative filmmaker's point of view, YouTuber's point of view, and then some other filmmaker's point of view, if I can think of it. So anyways, let's talk about the good and the bad of the Hotdog slider. So with the whole motion control thing with the gimbal, if you already have a gimbal, that's one of the major selling points is that yes, you can do something with it. However, as you saw in my tests, the Zhiyun motion control doesn't seem to be doing it smoothly. Now, I have been told that the DJI gimbals do much better in terms of the integration. So I think it's probably just a firmware thing that they need to fine tune. But at this current moment in time, I'm not going to say, well, you should definitely get it if you have a DJI Ronin gimbal, because I don't have one of those, and I would rather test it personally before I tell you that, yes, it's going to work better. So at this moment in time, I feel like the motion control is a little bit of a miss, but they have room to improve with firmware updates. In terms of the Hotdog slider itself without the motion controls, I love the fact that by moving the middle bar, you can get either a parallax shot or a panoramic shot. For YouTubers that are constantly doing these very similar movements, knowing that you have it just set up just right and you can always focus it towards the center of your table, you move the product around, and then you go ahead and get your shot. That saves you a lot of time than having to set up and move the fluid head. Literally, if you just bought a ball head and placed your camera on top and just left it there knowing you're always going to shoot at the center of the table, you're good to go. And if you want to use it with the motor, you can do that too. And that's another great selling feature, is the fact that the motor, it doesn't take a whole lot to connect it and do a motor shot. Because if you're on a narrative film set, some shots should be motorized, some you want someone to actually manually move it. In which case, the Hotdog slider really wins out in making it super quick to go between either type of slide. Now let's talk about the Zeppon slider. The Zeppon has some unique features that does make it more usable for certain types of filmmakers. So the first thing is the fact that it's much more compact and much easier for you to take with you onto a film shoot. And that's simply because it does that whole extension slider thing. So even though it's basically hitting about 36 inches of slide, you're not taking 36 inches of something with you. So that's definitely awesome. If you love to manually move your slider, with the whole fluid dampening technology, it makes it super easy for you to manually get super smooth slides, whereas the Hotdog slider doesn't have a flyweight or any sort of fluid dampening. So if you are in manual mode, you're literally just sliding on the rail, and if you don't have the most steady of hands, then you might want to consider the Zeppon. Now, in terms of the Zeppon motor, the one thing that's going against the Zeppon is the fact that if you want to go between a motorized shot and a manual shot, it's going to take you a decent little amount of time, probably I would say 3 times longer, to get that motor on there and attach the belts and or to take it off. This is where the Zeppon is really missing an opportunity here, is that I wish they made a design that was much faster to attach a motor and take it off. That way people can go between the two shots. So when it comes down to it, for me personally, if I was a YouTuber only, I would probably look into the 31-inch Hotdog slider, just because I'm probably going to be doing those parallax shots a whole bunch, and I would rather just have everything set up and good to go. But would I necessarily use it on a narrative film set? Probably not. I mean, I can, but I would definitely prefer the Zeppon, and that's simply because it's much more portable, and I love the fluid dampening because I'm definitely more of a user that wants to push everything manually. And because of that fluid dampening, I'm not worried about this whole motor sliding thing. Because of it, the fluid dampening basically makes my movement practically as if it was on a motor itself. So, in my personal opinion, between these two current setups, if YC Onion and Zhiyun and DJI work together even more to get that firmware and the app to just really work well with each other, then I think that's the better winner in terms of an overall package, especially if you already have a gimbal to begin with. But if you're looking just for a slider, I feel like the Zeppon 800 series, for me personally, is the best of both worlds for YouTube and and narrative films. And that's simply because it's very portable, and the fluid dampening basically makes your movement as if it was a slider on a motor already. So that's it for this week, everybody. If this video has made all the influence in your purchasing decisions, I would truly appreciate it if you check out my Amazon affiliate links down below. And again, this costs nothing extra to you, just gives me a little compensation so I can continue making videos like this for you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave it down below. I will get to them as fast as I can. And until then, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.